joining the show right now. For his work covering tennis, covering the NFL. I don't know if he has any ideas he wants to pitch Shark Tank, but Steve Weissman joins the show right now. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I do want to say, listen, Kevin O'Leary may not like what Del Supo's pitching, but I love his idea at Wimbledon to have walkouts with music, smoke, video walls. I'm buying in on that. And there's actually a tournament in St. Petersburg in Russia that has all that. Like, the players literally walk out on the court. There's dancers. There's music. There's video. It is a party. And then at the end of the tournament, there's a concert before they even give the trophy presentation. So I don't know if the All England Club's going to be into it, Del Supo, but
I love it.
I'm feeling your idea there.
Yeah, the Wimbledon Walkout's very boring. I was like, when I watch it, I'm like, I like it. It's all, I get it, the old building, and they walk out, but it's like they need some music there.
Yeah, they actually changed it this year because they used to walk out on the side, and this year they walked out straight onto center court.
Yep.
They're all about tradition.
Yeah, I get it.
Can't walk on the grass and all white. They got up in arms when Nick Kyrgios walked out in his J's that had red on them.
Yep.
And then he was wearing like his red hat after the match. And somebody asked him 5 questions about why would you do that? And he's like, because I'm doing me. My tradition is more important than their tradition. So y'all were talking about NBA earlier, and these guys, like Kyrgios, is the biggest NBA fan. He is a massive Celtic super fan. And so he was on the desk with us after one of his matches, and he's talking to me and John Wertheim, and he literally told us that if the Celtics lose a match in overtime or something like that, lose a game, he will throw matches the next day. He is that sad about the Celtics' losses. So, and Giannis is like a good friend with Stefanos Tsitsipas and Maria Sakkari, the Greek players, and Jimmy Butler and Sasha Zverev have a great relationship. I know you were mentioning Nikola Jokic from Serbia, and him and Novak Djokovic are also really tight. So there's a lot of connection between the tennis world and the rest of the sports world.
No, I love that, Steve, and I appreciate you bringing it up because it feels like tennis is having a cultural moment, largely due to the fact that there is this infighting within the community. The fact that Nick Kyrgios wearing red shoes has everybody up in arms, and at the Mike Del Tufo Classic, they're talking about now to the main court, Nick Kyrgios, tip your wager. Yeah, exactly. So it's this weird kind of time for tennis, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got your traditionalists, and then you've got your next gen. They call them the next gen. That they're trying to do their own thing, and I think that's kind of society in general. And so sometimes it ruffles feathers the wrong way. And tennis has always been a sport that it's a gentleman's sport, and this and that, and there's a lot of unspoken rules. And somebody like Nick Kyrgios, who in my opinion is absolutely box office, and you have to watch when he's on the court, does things a little bit differently. And I don't agree with everything he does, and the cursing and the throwing of the rackets, and, potentially these days there's been some incidents where players hit balls and, they might hit somebody in the crowd or slam a racket and it goes close to hitting a ball kid or something like that. But in terms of walking out on center court in J's, I think that's cool. And, his whole perspective on, the game and kind of wanting to entertain as well as be talented. I love that. Is it the best tactical decision to hit a tweener on, in the Wimbledon Championship in the middle of a rally? Probably not, but it's cool.
Steve Weissman joining the show. In addition to his work with the Tennis Channel, he works as well for NFL Network. How did you get your start covering tennis? It's been really cool to watch you kind of just do your thing the last few years, and I would imagine you had a passion for the sport at a young age.
Yeah, no, I've always played, Ben. I probably started playing when I was like 8 years old or something like that. Basketball was the first sport I ever played, but then at some point,
yeah, we've been there. We've all been there.
Aren't the tallest of folks, and so it was a sport I was most proficient at, and I played number one singles in high school, and I still play a ton now. I actually was a volunteer assistant coach for Loyola Marymount, the women's team, for a couple of years out here in LA, and I just have always loved tennis. And when I got to ESPN in 2010. I did everything I could. I mainly did SportsCenter and Outside the Lines and College Football Live and NFL Live and shows like that. But the one thing I always tried to get on was tennis. And Don Colantonio gave me an opportunity to do basically the ESPN3 DirecTV mix of the Australian Open and Wimbledon and the U.S. Open. So I was able to call matches and host our coverage. And I don't know if anybody saw it, but it was amazing. And I worked with folks like Mark Woodford and Chanda Rubin and Taylor Dent and Murphy Jensen and all these folks that have become great friends. And Woody really helped me get my in at Tennis Channel. And so when I left ESPN, I sent an email to a friend at Tennis Channel. I was like, hey, you got time to meet? And they were like, no, but why don't you – I flew out to Indian Wells just to stay with Woody and his family. And they were like, why don't you call a couple matches as like a paid audition? And so I called Marty Fish's first match back after his whole anxiety thing, and I'd become buddies with Marty. And I called it with Jim Courier, who was friends with Mark Woodford, so kind of like I was okay. And then I did a Sloane Stephens match with Lindsay Davenport, and they were like, all right, you killed it, so we're going to start bringing you back. And that's how I kind of got into Tennis Channel, and then I eventually moved to L.A., and I've been really grateful for all the folks, Bob Wiley and Ross Schneiderman and Ken Solomon, and just like everybody at Tennis Channel is so positive and supportive, and all the people I work with, whether it's Lindsay or Tracy Austin or Jim or Paul Anacone or Chanda or everybody there has just become like a family, and that's what tennis kind of is, and so everybody kind of takes care of one another, and I've been thankful that it's kind of gotten where it's at now.
Steve Weissman joining the show. Ben Lyons in for Rich, the Rich Eisen Show. So being somebody who's covered the game now at the highest level and with some of the biggest names around the sport, who's the greatest tennis player of all time?
So I know you had my boy Adnan Burke on the other day, and after Tom Cruise cut him off, he's a big Fed guy, and I think it's tough. So I work with who, in my opinion, is the GOAT, and that's Martina Navratilova. So, and she is so cool. I cannot tell you how cool Martina is, and to be able to, basically just hang out with her for 2 weeks on the desk and be able to talk tennis with somebody who won 59 Grand Slams, and she won 20 at Wimbledon, 9 there. Sadly, she wasn't able to come out on the court for the 100-year anniversary of Center Court because she got COVID. But Martina is the coolest and won everything and did it over 30 and 40 years. I mean, she won her last Grand Slam when she was 2 weeks before 50. So I know it's tough to compare eras, but being able to call Martina a friend and just see how others, revere her and look up to her, all she was able to overcome. She's kind of my GOAT, but, the GOAT becomes something that is statistical. And so there's that category. And obviously right now, Rafa has more Grand Slams on the men's side than anyone else. Margaret Court, she's absolutely not the GOAT. She has, the most majors on the women's side, played a lot of Australian Opens when nobody played that tournament, or most of the good players didn't play it. So Serena's insane as well. With the 23 majors, all she's able to accomplish, she's for sure like Martina and Serena are GOATs. And then you've got the big three, and you've got Roger, Rafa, and Novak. And so I think when you talk about greatest of all time, legacy also plays a factor. So it's the statistics, the stats, and then you got legacy. And legacy is more of a subjective quality, Ben, where how do they make you feel, right? So Roger makes a lot of people feel amazing, and the way he's able to make everything look effortless. And so that can put him on top. But then you've got Rafa, who arguably works harder than anyone else and literally takes no points off and gives 100% effort on every single point. And I don't know many humans in life that do that in any of their occupations. And then Novak Djokovic, who is probably going to overtake Rafa in terms of the all-time slams list, who's also insane. And I tweeted the other day that he's the greatest athlete in the world. And I truly believe that. Now, when I said that, I said athlete in the world. I didn't say tennis player in the world. I just said athlete, because he's freaking Gumby on court, and and is strong and fast, and the endurance and everything he does is next level. So I don't know. I'm going to go with Martina. I know that's not where you were heading in this question, but that's where I'm going to stay.
No, I left the question open-ended, and you gave me 5 minutes on the history and the state of the sport. I love it. It's why it's a great debate. If you had come with the quick answer, we'd be on to we'd be all talking about football already. We're going to stay on tennis. And I think this is what is so exciting about the sport right now, is that here you have the mix of culture, fashion. You have, like you said, the NBA effect, if you will, on the sports, the Mike Del Tufo Invitational, if you will. But then you have the tradition and the history and the legacy, and these two things are at odd now in the sport. Heading into the U.S. Open, what can tennis fans expect out in New York and in Flushing Meadows this fall?
Well, Ben, we may not have Novak Djokovic because as it stands right now, he's still not vaccinated, and you have to be vaccinated to enter the country. So what's crazy is that we may not see Novak play another Grand Slam until Paris next year because he's not allowed in Australia either. So we'll see. I mean, there's talk the U.S. government may change that rule, but it's wild that, arguably the number one player in the world right now is not going to be playing a major until next May, June. That said, I mean, Daniil Medvedev is your defending champion there, and he wasn't allowed to play Wimbledon because Wimbledon banned the Russians and the Belarusians. And then there was no point. So then the ATP and WTA said, well, if you're going to ban these players, we're going to take points away. So Novak Djokovic wins the tournament, falls to 7 in the world. And, on the women's side, Elena Rybakina, who, by the way, they didn't want Russians to play in the tournament. And then you get somebody on the women's side who won the tournament, who literally was born in Russia, and a few years ago took money from Kazakhstan, and now she plays for Kazakhstan and was able to play and then, wins the tournament when, in all honesty, she's Russian. But she actually falls in the rankings as well because she couldn't get any points. Nick Kyrgios, who gets to a final, would be 15 in the world right now, drops to 45 in the world from 40. So it's kind of a mess. But that aside, I mean, there's great opportunity. Rafa still hasn't lost at a major this year, which is insane. He won the Australian Open. Then he won his 14th Roland Garros. Then he gets to the semifinals at Wimbledon and unfortunately has to pull out because he's got a tear in his abdomen. The fact that he was able to beat Taylor Fritz in the quarterfinals with an abdominal tear is incredible. He won the French Open with the fact that he had this foot injury that he had to numb it every single match. So he's had a ton of injuries. And then he had a broken rib in the final of Indian Wells against Taylor Fritz earlier this year as well. So you can't count Rafa out. If Djokovic plays, he's one of the favorites. I'm curious to see how Daniil Medvedev comes back, the fact that he hasn't played in a little while. And then Kyrgios, he geared up for the grass court season. Is he still motivated? He says the fact that he didn't win at Wimbledon makes him more motivated because he's the type of guy that he feels like Wimbledon's the greatest tournament of all time. If he had won it, he would have been like, all right, kind of mic drop. I don't need to do anything for the rest of my life. So the fact that he's still motivated, I love that as well. And then on the women's side, there's so many. Iga Swiatek is the number one player in the world by far, lost early at Wimbledon. But you got, Coco Gauff, who's this teenager, 18-year-old American who is going to be the future. She's an absolute rock star, brilliant on and off the court. Amanda Anisimova made a deep run, another young American who's just 20 years old, also going to be just box office superstar. And then others from all across, from Paula Badosa, Ange Jabeur, folks that you may or may not have heard of. And then the other question is, Serena, is she playing? I don't know. I hope she does. I mean, the player she lost to at Wimbledon when it made it to the fourth round and lost to Anisimova. And Roger is not expected to play until the Labor Cup, which is after the U.S. Open. And then he's supposed to play in Basel, which is his home tournament after that. But there's still a lot of questions. But there's nothing like the excitement, the electricity of Arthur Ashe Stadium, nighttime matches. All the fans are back. So I'm going to be hyped either way.
Oh, it's the greatest. It's the greatest time in New York, and it's the greatest tennis event in the United States. Steve, you're a great ambassador for the sport. We appreciate you taking some time, man.
Oh, thank you so much. We didn't even get into football. My boy Brandon Staley, coming out, the Chargers coach, joining us at Wimbledon because he's a huge Rafa fan and all that. And Russell Wilson being in the royal box. But listen, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate you, Ben, and have a great rest of the week.
Thanks so much, man. Take care.